He had no idea the paralyzed wife he was abandoning was the secret trillionaire CEO who built his entire career from the shadows. For 3 years, she sat silently in that wheelchair, watching him rise to power on her money, her connections, her carefully orchestrated plan. And when he finally handed her those divorce papers, choosing the maid over the woman who gave him everything, he made the fatal mistake of his life. Because that maid? She wasn't just any maid. She was the final test. The woman in the wheelchair had hired her specifically to see if the man she loved would stay loyal when temptation walked through their door. He failed spectacularly. And what this paralyzed CEO did next didn't just break him. It erased every trace of the empire he thought he built, exposed secrets that would make him wish he'd never been born, and proved that underestimating a woman who conquered the business world from a wheelchair was the last mistake he'd ever make. This is the story of how one signature on divorce papers triggered the most devastating revenge in corporate history. The pen trembled in Victoria's hand, not from weakness, but from the effort it took not to hurl it across the mahogany dining room table into Marcus's perfectly smug face. 3 years in this wheelchair, and she'd learned to control every micro-expression, every breath, every tremor that might betray the fury of a woman who'd built a $12 billion empire before her 30th birthday. "Just sign it, Victoria," Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular blend of impatience and pity that had become his default tone since the accident. He stood beside Jessica, the maid Victoria had personally hired 8 months ago, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The same back Victoria's money had clothed in that designer uniform, the same woman Victoria had planted in her own home like a landmine, waiting to see if the man she'd loved enough to hide her entire identity for would step on it. He'd sprinted toward it. Victoria's eyes, the only part of her the accident hadn't touched, still sharp as the day she'd negotiated her first hostile takeover at 23, scanned the divorce papers. Every clause had been written by attorneys at Morrison & Lee, the firm her shell corporation had on permanent retainer. They'd been very thorough, just as she'd instructed them to be when Marcus had first approached them 3 weeks ago, complaining about his burden of a wife. The irony was exquisite. Marcus thought he was divorcing a paralyzed former event coordinator who'd been surviving on his VP salary at Carrington Technologies. He had no idea Carrington Technologies only existed because Victoria Sterling, known to the world as V.S. Sterling, the invisible CEO, who never appeared in public, who conducted all business through proxies, had injected $40 million into it 5 years ago specifically to create a position impressive enough for the man she'd loved. "There," Victoria whispered, her voice still soft, still broken sounding from the accident that had crushed her spine, but somehow left her vocal cords permanently damaged. She slid the papers across the table. "It's done." Marcus didn't even look at her as he gathered the documents. Jessica smiled, that sweet, innocent smile Victoria had watched meticulously through hidden cameras for 8 months, watching her play the role of temptress perfectly. "You'll be taken care of," Marcus said, the patronizing bastard. "The settlement is generous." Generous. He was offering her $50,000 from the signing bonus he'd received last month. A bonus that came from a special investor initiative that Victoria had personally approved, funneling her own money to him through 3 shell corporations so he'd feel successful enough to leave her. Tomorrow, the 72-hour waiting period would end. Tomorrow, the divorce would be final. Tomorrow, Marcus Holloway would learn what it meant to bite the hand that fed him, and then watch that hand systematically dismantle every single thing he'd ever loved. Victoria sat alone in the conservatory, the wheelchair-accessible addition Marcus had generously built last year with money from his performance bonus. Another gift from herself to herself wrapped in his arrogance. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she watched him load Jessica's suitcases into his Mercedes S-Class. The car she'd ensured he could afford by manipulating Carrington's executive compensation package. The memories came unbidden, sharp as glass. 7 years ago, Marcus Holloway had been a mid-level marketing analyst at a failing tech startup, charming but directionless. She'd been Victoria Chen then, her mother's surname, the one she used in her civilian life, working undercover as an event coordinator at a tech conference while scouting acquisition targets for her portfolio. She'd worn regular clothes, smiled like a normal person, pretended her phone calls weren't worth millions. He'd spilled coffee on her laptop, She'd laughed. He'd bought her dinner to apologize. She'd fallen in love with the way he saw her, really saw her, as just Victoria. Not V.S. Sterling, the ghost who'd made fortunes in biotech, real estate, and artificial intelligence. Not the woman whose signature was worth more than some country's GDP. For 2 years, it had been real. She'd kept the secret because she wanted to be loved for herself, not her money. Then came their wedding day, the small ceremony Marcus had insisted on. Nothing fancy, just them. And she'd decided to tell him everything that night. The accident happened on the way to their honeymoon. A drunk driver, a guardrail, a 40-foot drop. Marcus walked away with bruises. Victoria's spine shattered at T12. She'd woken up paralyzed, and in his eyes, she'd seen it immediately. The death of desire, the birth of obligation. He'd stayed, noble, suffering Marcus, because leaving a newly paralyzed wife would make him look like a monster. So she'd made it easier for him. She'd used her network to build his career, create opportunities, flood his life with success, all while playing the grateful, helpless wife who depended on him. 3 years of watching him slowly fall out of love with her while falling in love with his own reflection. Jessica appeared in the doorway, radiant in her casual clothes, no longer wearing the maid's uniform. "I'm taking the guest towels," she announced, not asked. "You won't need the nice ones anyway." Victoria smiled, that broken, trembling smile she'd perfected. "Take whatever you want." Through the window, she saw Marcus checking his phone, probably looking at the apartment listings Jessica had been sending him. The luxury condo downtown, $2 million. He'd already been pre-approved for the mortgage. Thanks to the stellar credit profile and debt-to-income ratio Victoria had spent 3 years engineering. 68 hours until the divorce finalized. 68 hours until Marcus Holloway discovered that every brick in his castle was made of sand and the tide was coming in. The movers arrived on Thursday morning, 72 hours exactly since Victoria had signed the papers. She sat in her wheelchair by the living room window, silent and still as a statue, while strangers dismantled the life she'd built. Marcus supervised from the foyer, pointing at furniture, claiming pieces Victoria had selected, had paid for, had chosen because they reminded her of the man she thought he was. "That painting goes," he told the movers, gesturing at the abstract piece above the fireplace. Victoria had bought it at a charity auction for $200,000, under a proxy bidder, of course. Marcus believed he'd found it at an estate sale for $300. "It matches the new place perfectly." Jessica descended the stairs wearing Victoria's Hermes scarf. Not one Victoria had left out, one she'd retrieved from the locked drawer in the master bedroom. Victoria's throat tightened. That scarf had been her mother's. The only thing she had left after the woman who'd built Sterling Industries from nothing had died of cancer. "Marcus, honey," Jessica called out, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Should we take the wedding china? I mean, it's not like she's going to be hosting dinner parties." She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound cut through Victoria like a blade. Marcus glanced at Victoria, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe. Or perhaps just annoyance that his ex-wife was witnessing his new happiness. "Leave it," he said quietly. "She should have something." The pity in his voice was worse than Jessica's cruelty. Victoria's hands gripped the wheelchair armrests. She wanted to scream, wanted to stand up. She could stand, had been standing in private for 18 months. Her incurable paralysis, nothing more than an elaborate performance orchestrated with her private medical team. Wanted to rip that scarf from Jessica's throat and tell them both exactly who they were stealing from. Instead, she let a single tear roll down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her damaged voice barely audible. "You've been so kind about everything." Marcus had the decency to look away. Jessica did not. "You know, Victoria," Jessica said, perching on the arm of the sofa. "Victoria's custom Italian sofa, $40,000, purchased through another shell company. Marcus told me about your little situation. How you can't, you know." She made a vague gesture. "I just want you to know I don't judge you for not being able to satisfy him. It's not your fault you're broken." The room went silent. Even the movers stopped, shocked. Victoria's tear-tracked face lifted. Her eyes, those sharp, brilliant eyes, met Jessica's for a prolonged moment. She smiled that broken smile. "You're absolutely right," Victoria said. "You're absolutely right," Victoria said softly. "I am broken, and you're so whole, so perfect. I hope you'll both be very happy." Marcus grabbed Jessica's arm. "Jesus, Jess, let's just go." As they walked out, Marcus carrying the last box, Jessica wearing stolen silk, Victoria sat alone in the echoing house. Her house, the house she'd purchased through a trust, the deed he'd never actually seen. She pulled out her phone, her real phone, not the basic model Marcus knew about. One message sent to her head of security. "Activate Prometheus protocol. 72 hours from my mark. Leave nothing standing." The tears on her face dried. The waiting was over. Marcus Holloway had never felt more alive. The downtown condos, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city he was conquering, or so he believed. Jessica was in the kitchen, humming while she arranged flowers in a vase they'd bought together. His phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues about his impending promotion to senior vice president. Everything was falling into place. "Babe," Jessica called out, "your mom's calling again." Marcus ignored it. His mother had been cold since the divorce, spouting nonsense about Victoria being too good for him and how he'd regret this. She'd even refused to meet Jessica. Let the old woman sulk. She'd come around once she saw how happy he was. He poured himself scotch, Macallan 25, $800 a bottle, and toasted his reflection in the window. "To new beginnings," he murmured. His work phone rang. Richard Carrington, the CEO. "Odd," Richard usually emailed. "Marcus, we need to talk." Richard's voice was strained. "There's been a development with our primary investor." Marcus's stomach tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "What kind of development?" "They're pulling out. All of it. $40 million, gone. They're invoking the termination clause in the investment agreement. We have 30 days to repay or..." Richard's voice cracked. "We're going to have to make cuts. Significant cuts." The scotch turned to acid in Marcus's throat. "But the investor has been silent for 5 years. Why now? Who are they?" "That's the thing. We don't know. It's buried under shell corporations. Our lawyers are trying to trace it. But whoever this is, they've covered their tracks perfectly." "Marcus, your division is burning through cash fastest. The board is meeting tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, but your promotion? We're going to have to table it. We might have to let people go." Marcus ended the call, hands shaking. Jessica appeared beside him, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he lied. "Just work stuff." But it wasn't nothing. Over the next 48 hours, Marcus's carefully constructed world began collapsing like a house of cards in a windstorm. The mortgage company called. His pre-approval had been erroneously issued due to a credit reporting error. They needed additional documentation, tax returns, asset verification, employment confirmation. The closing date was postponed indefinitely. His Mercedes lease termination notice arrived. The corporate fleet program that had subsidized it was being discontinued. Effective immediately, the country club where he'd been networking called to inform him his membership application had been rejected. No explanation provided. His credit cards, all 4 of them, were suddenly declined. Unusual activity patterns, the fraud department claimed. Accounts frozen pending investigation. Jessica was furious. "I thought you said you had everything handled. The apartment, the car, the lifestyle you promised." "It's temporary," Marcus insisted, even as panic clawed at his chest. "Just some administrative errors. I'll fix it." But deep down, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine fear. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria sat in her home office, the one Marcus had never been allowed to enter, the one with 6 monitors displaying real-time financial data, legal documents, and surveillance feeds. She watched the numbers cascade, watched the algorithms execute, watched the empire she'd built around him systematically withdraw its support. Her assistant David appeared on one screen via video call. Phase 1 complete. Carrington Technologies is hemorrhaging. His personal assets are frozen through 14 different compliance triggers. Should I proceed to Phase 2? Victoria's finger hovered over the button. Phase 2 would destroy his reputation. Phase 3 would destroy his freedom. Proceed, she said softly. The game had only just begun. The boardroom at Carrington Technologies smelled like expensive leather and imminent death. Marcus sat across from Richard Carrington and 3 stone-faced board members, his tie suddenly too tight, his mouth dry as chalk. Marcus, we've reviewed the financials, Richard said, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. Your division has been operating at a 73% loss for the past 18 months. The only thing keeping it afloat was strategic investor funding that we now understand was specifically earmarked for your projects. Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the folder. Red numbers bled across every page. That can't be right. My performance reviews were influenced by investor requirements, one board member cut in, her voice clinical. Requirements that no longer exist. Effective immediately, we're terminating your employment. Security will escort you out. The room spun. Wait, my severance package, my stock options? Forfeited due to the performance clauses in your contract, Richard said, not meeting his eyes. I'm sorry, Marcus. The investor didn't just pull funding. They sent us a detailed report showing that every major win you claimed was facilitated. The Singapore deal? Pre-negotiated by external consultants. The Morrison account? Handed to you. You were never the rainmaker we thought you were. Marcus stumbled out of Carrington Tower 20 minutes later, carrying a cardboard box with a coffee mug and a photo of Jessica. The photo where she was smiling at him like he was her entire world. His phone buzzed. Jessica. We need to talk. She was waiting at the condo when he arrived, except it wasn't his condo anymore. The landlord had changed the locks. Jessica stood in the hallway surrounded by suitcases, her face cold as winter. I can't do this, she said flatly. I thought you were going places, Marcus. I thought you were someone, but you're just nobody. A nobody who got lucky and didn't even realize it wasn't real. Jess, please. This is temporary. I'll find another position. I have connections. Your connections aren't returning your calls. I checked. She picked up her bags. My ex called me yesterday. Tyler. Remember him? The hedge fund guy I told you about? He wants to reconcile. He's got a place in Tribeca. Real money, Marcus. Not whatever this was. The words hit like physical blows. You're going back to him? Just like that? Just like that. She walked past him, then paused. Oh, and that scarf I took? The Hermes one? I looked it up. $35,000. I'm keeping it. Consider it compensation for wasting 8 months on a man who turned out to be built on smoke. She was gone. Marcus slid down the hallway wall, cardboard box clutched to his chest, and wept. 42 years old, homeless, jobless, abandoned. How had everything collapsed so quickly? His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Holloway, this is James Chen from Blackridge Capital Partners. We've been reviewing your profile, and we believe you're exactly the kind of sophisticated investor we're looking for. We have an opportunity fully SEC compliant, incredible returns, but we're only offering it to a select few. Given your background at Carrington, Marcus wiped his eyes. I don't have capital right now. We have bridge financing available. For someone of your caliber, we can arrange terms. Mr. Holloway, I've seen men in transition turn situations like yours into comebacks. This could be your moment, but I need to know now. Are you a man who stays down, or are you a man who fights back? The desperation clawed at Marcus's throat. A lifeline. Finally, a lifeline. Tell me more, he whispered. Across town, Victoria watched the conversation unfold in real time through the wiretap her security team had placed on Marcus's phone. James Chen, actually James Park, a crisis actor from Los Angeles, was performing beautifully. He's taking the bait, David reported from the monitor beside her. Should we proceed to the Kozlov introduction? Victoria's finger hovered over the button. Phase 2 would destroy his finances. Phase 3 would destroy his freedom. But there was a Phase 4 she hadn't told anyone about yet. The phase that would make Marcus Holloway wish he'd never been born. She thought about the scarf, her mother's scarf, the one Jessica had stolen. She thought about the wedding vows Marcus had spoken. in sickness and in health. She thought about the 3 years she'd spent in that wheelchair, watching the man she loved fall in love with his own reflection. Her hand moved to the keyboard. She typed 4 words into the encrypted message system. Activate Phase 4. Total annihilation. David's face went pale. Ms. Sterling, Phase 4? That's irreversible. Are you certain? Victoria's eyes never left the screen showing Marcus, broken and desperate, agreeing to wire his remaining money to a company that didn't exist. He made his choice, she said softly. Now he lives with the consequences. The screen flickered. Another window opened, this one showing federal wire transfer alerts, Department of Justice case files, and something else. Something David hadn't seen before. What is that? He asked, pointing to a sealed document marked Confidential, Holloway Family Trust. Victoria smiled. That dangerous, beautiful smile. That, she said, is where the real pain begins.